Good afternoon, and thank you for staying for the last panel of today, and I think it's the last panel of the symposium. I think this is a conversation that continues on how we're going to support art through the development of the ecosystem. I'm extremely delighted to be here having this conversation. Us being here is actually an example of how corporate can drive the development of art as a sector. For which I'd like to thank Untitled Chapter for their support to host the Riwaq and the bankers. And I think without that, we wouldn't have been able to have this conversation today. There was a void in the absence of a Riwaq from the art scene in Bahrain. And again, I'd go back to the need for corporate support to fill these voids, to empower institutions, independent institutions like a Riwaq, who could only survive and thrive, and not only a Riwaq and many other players in the scene itself, who would only be able to survive and thrive through corporate supports towards art. Building ecosystems and infrastructure, which is something that was discussed yesterday, whether it's formal or informal education, community or governmental, is crucial to continue. It won't stop, it's never done, it will always be progressing, and corporates do play a key role in that. Without the corporate support, as I said, independent platforms can't function, and they are a key pillar of that ecosystem. We have today with us on the panel, we've got Ahmed from Tamkeen, a developmental agency with a focus on skilling Bahraini talents and job creation and enriching the job market. We've got Noora from Untitled Chapter Bank, an international brand that is deeply rooted in Bahrain, and we've got Sheikh Khalifa from Batelco, one of the most prominent national brands of Bahrain. And I think I will just start the conversation with a very, very generic question. I think we'll start with Sheikh Badr. Where does art sit on your CSR agenda?
Okay, أول شيء مساء الخير. But before we start, I want to say how impressed I am by the space. I'm also very impressed by the translator, mashallah. She's been translating Arabic, English back and forth. When it comes to Batelco has been involved in corporate social responsibility since it started. But over the last few years, we decided as a company and we start focusing more on clear pillars that we want to support in order to create impact in the community. We found that we used to do a lot, بس ما يبين. مثلا باتلكو معروفه بشنو 4 or 5 years ago. ولكن ما كانوا يسوون شيء وايد بس where's the impact? Now we're more about creating social impact, positive impact in the community rather than just giving and taking pictures and putting things in the paper. For the last, and we have a strategy that has been approved by the board. Now we start focusing on two main streams. One is youth, and by youth we mean youth, young people, well-being, sports, and positive things that keep the youth engaged and creating opportunities for them to express their energy in a positive way. The other pillar that we want to focus on, and we started, but we still need to do a lot more, and that area is education. And by education, it's not only formal education, but it's education, learning, any opportunity for the young, again, the youth, to develop themselves. And art comes part of that, and part of the education and helping the youth discover themselves. We still don't do a lot in art. We have collaborations with certain organizations around art. We want to do more, but again, from an educational perspective. لأن I think in Bahrain we have a lot of talents, and certain areas like arts sometimes are not given enough attention, especially at young talented children and students who mashallah. We want to help create opportunities for them to develop those talents and to shine and really kind of bring that potential out. This is how we look at things, and inshallah, with collaborating with more organizations, we can create more positive impact.
Inshallah. Noora, we move to Untitled Chapter.
Thank you for having us this afternoon, and I want to thank everyone for staying behind for the last session. Ahmed, you bring up a very good subject, CSR, or corporate social responsibility. We have actually, in the past 5 years, moved away from that term, and we're now using the term sustainability. For the main reason is, يعني مثل ما Sheikh Badr mentioned, and the main point of giving back to the community is, besides community engagement, fundraising, and giving back to certain pillars that really, really matter, we need to sustain whatever is being given to the community and and help it grow. So with us, يعني, like other corporates and international companies, local, regional as well, we've identified certain pillars and certain themes that we want to engage the community in. So health is one of the areas that we focus on, or used to be, but now we've managed to put it all under one umbrella. It's called the Future Makers. It boils down to entrepreneurship, education, and employability. And with that, it involves and includes financial education or providing access in whatever form of education to people and within the local communities wherever we exist. The same thing is applied for employability and entrepreneurship. So wherever there is any form of a sustained type of activity that we can engage in and contribute to, where it helps people to be better employed or to be employable in these sectors, this is where we will also exist. The same thing with entrepreneurship. So we don't really focus specifically and solely on art, but art can actually be one of the main areas where we can help sustain communities in the education, employability, and entrepreneurship. Having said that, we definitely do not do enough within the art scene. There needs to be more, given the current environment and how the access people have on social media. And it's a proven fact that art has become a mean for people to broaden their horizons, whether it's in therapy, whether it's culture, whether it's just educational. And I think as institutions, we need to provide access for people to art and the art culture. Thank you.
Ahmed, the question will be slightly different when we speak about Tamkeen. It's a developmental agency at the end of the day, and I think if we speak about education, which is I think a recurring word that we've been hearing in the past discussions and in today's conversation, art education and art as a career path, where does that fall into Tamkeen's mandate?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having us today in this session, Bayan, Ahmed, and team, for inviting us, of course, and thank you everyone for staying for the session as well. I think, as you said, I was honestly worried to be answering the same question as Noora and Badr, because to that it's difficult to answer that in the context of Tamkeen, because of the way the fund has been established. For us in Tamkeen, I think the story is different. We were established back in 2006 with the purpose of helping the entire economy as a whole to move forward, to help individuals to have a better role in the economy generally, and help the private sector to become the agent of growth. And having that last specific word, helping the private sector to be a larger contributor to the economy, I think that's the key where we have to look into the different sectors. Tamkeen has always been sector agnostic. We have helped all sectors. Similarly, in the past, we've had some partnerships with the art sector, and I apologize for that. And I think you guys you deserve an apology from us for that very specific reason, because when we give a trading company or a construction company a support to participate in an event outside Bahrain, then we look for a formal company going to an exhibition like non-food, Jitex, etc., and participate in those events. But for you guys, the story is different. It's residencies, it's learning experiences, fellowship programs, and we did not have anything off the shelf for these sectors. Today, we're looking at it differently. We've just, similarly to Batelco, we've had a revamp in our strategy, and we're trying to better understand and look into the sectors based on their needs. What we've done here is we've tried to specify the sectors that we believe will have a larger contribution to the economy going forward. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but creative industries has been specified, I mean to you guys, creative industries, including ours, has been specified as one of the sectors that we'll be focusing more on. And to be able to do that, we'd like to hear from you. Tamkeen will never be a leading institution in any of the verticals because we are not the experts in the field. Ms. Bayan and the people in this room, I think you have better expertise than Tamkeen and any other formal or informal organization in the country because you've been there and you've done that and you've kind of learned from the community locally and internationally. And we'd like to learn from you. So what we're doing these days is we're trying to sit with the different groups, get their feedback, try to build a strategy based on that. One thing I'll assure you, Tamkeen will be handling the way we support the arts industry and the creative industries is a whole differently going forward. That's one. And the second thing is, we will always need your help because again, it's you that will lead that entire process, not us. We'll be part of the support. But the community, the ecosystem is there. Although it was not very formal, but it has been there. The main question that we need to ask ourselves in Tamkeen, how can we help you to contribute further to the economy? And that's the answer that we need.
How would this start though? Where's the starting point? Do we expect art institutions and practices to come up with the programs and go to Tamkeen, or is it a collaborative effort? Because I think usually there is a problem with the starting point.
True. And I think the mistake that we've done in the past is that we were waiting for different initiatives and we were supporting based on case-to-case basis. And I think that was the biggest mistake, the biggest trap we fell into. Okay, let me correct that. It was not a mistake, maybe it was good for that part of time. But today we need to look at that holistically. Today, luckily in Bahrain, we do have, His Majesty has established a National Council for Arts. And for us in Tamkeen, what we're trying to do is we're trying to call everyone in the scene. We had some meetings with Ms. Bayan and we have continuous conversation with her. We have a similar conversation with other main players in the ecosystem. We're trying to hear from everyone, and based on that, we'll establish where Tamkeen will stand, what sort of interventions we could have to support the arts industry holistically. And we do expect similarly from the main players in the ecosystem, we do expect, and I'd like to thank you guys, we do expect from corporates like Batelco, Standard Charters, whether they are local MNCs or other organizations in the market to play its role as well, supporting and empowering the art scene.
I'll move back to the private sector. Speaking of that, do you think so? Globally, there are taxation systems and tax incentives and breaks to organizations which drive them to participate in art. You'll find banks and financial institutions not only sponsoring foundations but also creating their own foundations, art foundations, and creating their own programs. Do you think we need such regulations and a taxation system to encourage banks to move into that, or impose certain laws? And from a regulatory perspective, it's a tough one, I know.
It's a general question, but Noora.
Is this the solution? Is this the only way to get institutions participating or supporting art?
Let me just take one step back and as private sector corporations and institutions, مثل ما الشيخ بدر قال, you and حتى Tamkeen, we come up with strategies, whether it's coming from group or London or the UK or Bahrain or whichever it is, and it gets approved by the board. you become more concentrated and focused on what you want to, as a company, what you want to contribute to. What's important for us as private sector organizations is that whoever comes to us and approaches us, that they have a sustained strategy for their initiatives. What has been happening in the past, you get one-off exhibitions, one-off artists that comes and approaches us for sponsorship or donation or some form of, but there is no thought, there is no continued thought process on how this initiative will continue and be sustained throughout time. Riwaq, for example, is such an institution where they have a clear vision or on where they want to be, what they're doing. They have a clear idea of the timelines. يعني when Bayan approached us for the house, she already had a 3 months plan. And then before the 3 months ended, she already had a 6 months plan. So يعني trapping us to say that. But no, يعني not يعني I'm joking. But يعني what I'm saying. So but that was
4 or 5 years.
exactly. That keeps us as private sector institutions interested in continuing these initiatives. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of يعني Batelco, Tamkeen, GPICs, and many other companies. That's what private sector companies need, a clear strategy and a plan from whoever approaches us to have a clear path on how do they want to take that initiative. And I remember I used to work for BBK, and we were approached for a conference sponsorship. It's all very ad hoc, very haphazard. And I remember the time my CEO said, oops, okay. My CEO said basically that, why can't these institutions or these entities have budgets or funds that will ensure their sustainability, rather than every year they come begging for money and begging for funds. And it just puts them in a very awkward position where, and puts us in awkward positions because we want to help. We don't have enough budgets. We've already planned our yearly activities, and it goes just like that. But then sponsoring a conference is not really useful to us. How is that going to help the community? You're bringing in a bunch of experts to talk about the latest medical research. But then what? It's paying for hotel rooms, it's paying for tickets, it's paying for food and,
And somebody's making money.
And someone's, exactly. So that doesn't interest us. What interests us is initiatives like what we have here. So answering your question out of the taxation, look, I think in general, when companies put aside a budget from their total income or total profit or top line, 1% or 2%, there are countries that specify the percentage. And there are countries that don't, but then they depend on these companies to take it upon themselves to contribute. I'm not for quota. I'm not for specifying certain percentages. However, I am for directing these companies into and guiding them into their responsibility towards the community.
I don't think we have in Bahrain we have a shortage of funds. Okay, so if you say you want to impose taxation or regulation or what have you, that can be a solution if there's no fund or if there's shortage of funds targeted towards CSR or for the community. I think we have enough money. We collectively have the national companies, the banks. There's a lot of activities, a lot of things are happening. And an example, Hammad in Nakhir, I think over 2-3 days, we raised more than 3 million. There is the money, but the focus is not there. And there are 2 challenges. One is there is the traditional understanding of what CSR is, and what Noora said, in moving towards sustainability actor. So people think if it's a CSR act, it means you give money to somebody who needs and the needy
Charity.
or charity, mashallah. But it's much more than that. This is how you enrich the community. But we need to realize that. The second thing, unfortunately, sometimes you see almost everyone focusing on 2 or 3 things and overlooking other areas. And sometimes it becomes a trend. Okay, يعني مثلا for example learning digital learning, something like that. And then all the companies put their money for digital learning. زين السنه اللي عقبها مثلا يكون عندنا تشالنج حق خلينا نقول people with special needs. Everyone is putting their money. I think there needs to be alignment in يعني each company or entity or organization, when I want to support the community, what am I going to focus on? So this is one thing. And the other challenge that we face, there's a lot of charities and jam'iyyat, and it takes a lot of energy to filter them out. We know who are the good ones that are making real change. عندنا احنا مثلا الرواق، عندنا مثلا مركز الشيخ ابراهيم، عندنا جهات احنا نتشارك نشتغل معاهم. بس على طول السنه نرهق من هذه الكونفرنسز، وانا من صوب فلان اللي صار حق فلان ولد عم فلان وبسوي كونفرنس عن شلون دور البحرين في الفضاء.
صح.
ب 100,000 دينار. زين عشان شغله يستفيد 30,000 40,000 دينار. And this is reality. يعني forgive me for my honesty. But that money can be put in something useful and something real and something that has impact. So going back to this question, I don't think the challenge is with the fund or regulation. Of course, I think all companies believe in what we do. أعتقد الشيء الثاني, if I add one more thing, I think also organizations have the responsibility, and then through their practices, they ensure they have a positive impact on the community. It's not about only giving money. For example, I know companies that they brag about مثلا supporting the community, but when it comes to certain occasions, like مثلا National Day, أو ما شابه, and they want to produce a video for the National Day, everything they do is from outside of Bahrain. The director, the artists, the actors, كل من برا البحرين. وين عيد وطني هو بحرين. And there is nothing Bahraini about it.
Yeah.
زين purchasing corporate gifts مثلا, okay, from China. احنا we started and inshallah we يعني الله يوفقنا, we can do يعني we can have an impact. For example, now our corporate gifts for the main events are done by Bahraini artists. Whether it's يعني a piece of art, a painting, ما شابه, it's to support that community. إذا نسوي أي عمل فني, it's 100% Bahraini. The director, the actors, the people who do the decoration, ما شابه. I know it's not directly related to art, but we try through our practices, and then we engage Bahrainis. We give them the opportunity to grow. This is sustainability.
صح.
You use them today, you're going to use them, for the next event that's coming up. It's not only about giving a few thousand dinars or السلام عليكم السنة الجاية. بحاول أساعدك. No, it's more
a
than
standard
that.
it's a standard answer.
ما عندنا
Next
طلعت
year.
5,000 No, it's I think ساعات نقول لهم ما تدري. It's also through our practices. يعني from daily and the way we conduct our business, how are we supporting the community in different aspects? We chose the education, we chose the youth, we chose the sport, and we think we can create an impact there. And maybe other organizations find their passion in other areas that again will create that positive impact.
I'd like to capitalize on the comments from both Sheikh Badran and Noora. For us as funders, and I think that includes the private sector entities as well, we face 3 main challenges when we get requests from sectors like the emerging sectors generally, and arts, sports, and these sorts of sectors. I think that we have 3 main challenges. One is there is no clear roadmap on how is that contributing to the sustainability of that sector. And I think that's the first question. No matter how rosy the proposal is, no matter how great it seems, but we don't see continuity in what comes after that, and how can that contribute to the employment, to the revenues. We do have KPIs internally. That includes investments, that includes employment, that includes revenues and bottom line of that sector and its contribution to the national economy. But that question is never answered through these sort of I'd say scattered proposals. The second thing is the scattered efforts within those emerging sectors. Again, we haven't seen yet the plan from the National Council for Arts, but I'm sure they're working on a strategy for the entire space. But previous to that, when we used to get proposals, and again, we've seen great ones from Riwaq, for example, and we believed in what they've done over the past 10, 12, 15 years in the Adliya space, but 24 years. I was gonna try not to say the years.
When I was born.
So, and other players as well. But again, we usually get original ideas and we get those copycats that may try to do something similar in different areas, and then if we pay or support one, why not the other one? Why not the third one? Why not the fourth one? And they keep exhausting that specific budgets that were assigned by these entities. And I think, I'm sorry for that, I think the third issue is sometimes when we're part of an emerging sector, we don't prioritize properly. In the sense of, we get proposals for things that are good to have, nice to have, like events and conferences like Sheikh Badr and Noora mentioned. But then, okay, so I don't want to comment on that. But yeah, so we get proposals for ideas that are great and nice to have, but not necessarily impactful and necessary for that specific point of time, for what Bahrain needs to do at this very point of time to start sustaining that sector going forward. We want to help Riwaq, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone on this panel. We'd like to help Riwaq in a way that she does not need to come next year for Standard Charter, Batelco, or Tamkeen, or other market players for support for this event. We'd like to find ways to sustain the industry. We know that may take a while and we need to support it meanwhile, but we need to come up with a plan for that.
Just going back to the taxation issue, for every initiative done or taken by the government in terms of imposing financial requirements, there is definitely also some form of a reaction. So, for example, should the government say we're going to tax you for this, for it to go into CSR or to art? What ends up happening as well is that we have to produce proof on how and measurement on how this money was actually spent and what the measurement of success was, whether the KPIs have been actually met and established. So when you go into the route of taxation and revenue and collecting and imposing that on companies, you also burden them with a lot of paperwork, with cost of compliance and having more teams to do the paperwork. I know that because we are.
But this is happening already with the ASG reporting and so on and
exactly.
And so
And now, and I'm sure it's going to catch up with Bahrain soon. We are regulated by the UK, and we are required for every sponsorship or donation to fill out certain forms. Let's say you come to me, Bayan comes to me with a sponsorship proposal. I have to first check the chairman, vice chairman, CEO. We do a complete anti-money laundering check, reputational risk. We answer that. It goes to compliance for approval or financial crime control. She's sitting right there. So it goes through a whole process just to prove this is, and it's going to come to Bahrain eventually because we're moving towards stronger and more stringent regulations in how we spend sponsorship money and donations money. So if we do burden organizations with taxes that go directly towards CSR, they're going to have the burden of proving how this money was spent. You allow them no flexibility, and sometimes when we need to give these little jam'iyat that really need the money to stay alive, you remove that flexibility completely because let's all be honest, these little جمعيات do not have any way of showing proof of success, or there's I'm talking about جمعيات مثلا جمعية دار كليب للتراث, things like that.
No, but the question is, when it comes to impact and impact assessment, and I think that's a challenge maybe with art generally, is what are the metrics? How do you measure? It's not a short-term thing, it's a long-term. So that will not feed into your KPIs for 2022, it will feed into the KPIs for 2030. Taking a long-term vision on KPIs and on metrics and how you assess is key. How does that is taken into account when it comes to sponsoring art? Is that the reason why people shy away from sponsoring art and they'd rather, let me do this tournament because I know X number of people participated and this many players did it and so on?
And I think it's not only that, I think we're also not educated enough when it comes to art. I personally, for example, there are things I've heard today I've never heard about in my life. There are certain initiatives that we don't know about. I think يمكن إعلاميا يمكن إحنا كأشخاص we're not educated enough on knowing how to create an impact when it comes to supporting art. Maybe we need either to get ourselves more acquainted with that, or maybe the art community has a responsibility also to kind of reach out and educate us on. I know, for example, personally, I appreciate art, but I'm not an artist myself. I have nothing. I tried when I was a kid. I tried to go and paint, and I remember the teacher told me كان نصبي قال لي يا ابني شوف لك حاجة تانية. رحت بتعلم عود. ثاني يوم المدرس كان عراقي بغى يكسر العود على راسي. I need to focus somewhere else يعني ما عندي. أعتقد حتى in the community that when we talk about sport, everyone knows about sport. Everyone knows about مثلا ايش بنسوي في رمضان. Everyone knows, but when it comes to art, there are very few people talk about it and talk about, let's have an idea about how we can support art further. Only when it comes to us, then we react. We're not proactive when it comes. And I'm being very honest.
Sheikh Badr, A for effort.
I have two more questions and I think then we'll open the floor.
So I think I completely agree with what Sheikh Badr was mentioning, not about his childhood stories, but generally about the fact that we don't have enough knowledge about this sector, us as organizations that are trying to support it. So that's why I think I started, when I asked the first question, well, you guys are the experts in that. But, okay, so to answer your questions, we need to have KPIs first, and then we can cascade it down into more tactical approach. The issue is we don't have a roadmap. Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? And how can we measure the success in that long period of time? And then we can start thinking of what are the tactical approaches, the tactical steps that we can take to reach that end result. For example, we could agree we need to send 10 people or 20 people or 100 people to participate in events like Benali in Riyadh, for example, or in France or Italy. But again, we don't have a plan. So it boils down today to what proposals we get from different entities. They want to participate in XYZ. We try to think of it, do our due diligence internally, and then respond. But there's no plan for it. So to achieve somewhere, we need to start with where do we want to be in a specific place.
And just going back to one small point that you mentioned, setting up targets and KPIs. I don't think everything can be measured by KPIs, especially when you're investing and something that would take a long time to see the results. But you have to do it in a good faith. And then you invest, you support, and over a few years that will show the impact. I always use an example of how Bahrain handled the COVID situation in the last 2 years. And Bahrain excelled in how it handled the COVID situation. But that's the result of 50 years of hard work and investment in infrastructure, and education, and health, and telecommunication. It's not overnight you have very fast internet and you get things better. Okay, and you have capable doctors, and you have good hospitals, and you have good management system. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay, so the country excelled because it invested over a long number of years. And when I personally travel, for example, what are the first things you see in a new country? You look at how clean the country is, how the systems work, and you look at architecture, you look at art, you look at the music, food. This is what gives a country its characteristics, and art is a big part of that. But I think it's something that's worth the investment, but you're not going to see the results overnight.
I just want to add. So it boils down to whether the company has a budget or not.
Yes.
Because we can sit there and say, يعني, such we have strategies and we have pillars, and as much as we would love to stick to these strategies and pillars, يعني, let's face it, I'm sure we've all been in those situations. We are approached by certain people, خلاص, you have to do this. It's not within the pillars, it's not within the strategy, you have to do it. Or, on the other hand, it's what is really picking up and what is really in and speaking to the audience you want to target. So, for example, أول art and the art scene used to be, to a certain extent, to a very exclusive, not group, but very exclusive. يعني not many people.
Elitist.
Yeah.
It's elitism and art.
I
That's the
wouldn't
misconception.
say even elitist. It was just exclusive to certain people who had access or who were lucky enough to be artistic and have really good talent discovered from school or whatever. Now, and especially with COVID, you have access to all these social media posts and everything. Everyone's doing art. Everyone dabbled into something. Discovering, re-exploring themselves, re-exploring talent. I have. But you know, you rediscover certain talent that you have, and everyone who, when I mentioned, for example, to someone, oh, I started taking art lessons, they're like, oh my God, everyone and her mother and his mother has started taking art. So what this proves to us is the power of individual initiative, because they want to get into that. Access has become much easier and faster and cheaper to get, or less expensive to get art material, and access to instructors and art teachers. Now, when I say art, I mean painting, music, sculpture, whatever goes under art, acting. People have become more courageous in going after what they want to explore. In the past, people get very nervous about, okay, this person, they might laugh at me if I start painting, or this person might do this if I start singing, or لا طبعا, of course.
The question is, do you think the misconception of associating art with elitism or the art of and with a small group or an exclusive group, making it intimidating, makes corporates shy away, that they don't look at it as part of community development? Because art is community and art is education. But I think there is that misconception somewhere in the society.
I think art used to be thought of as a hobby and something not community related. The more, and to be honest, like Ahmed mentioned, it is also the responsibility of now these entities, the National Council, schools, حتى the educational system needs to put more discipline and more attention towards the art culture. When I was in school, there was for example, the garden show, and we used to do or the art show. Whoever was old enough to have witnessed that, بس you know. ما تدري انت مشغول في راسك بس you know, there's no, even with sports you had that PE class, you had that art class, and then يعني art teachers were not really يبوا بس ورق مقوى ورسمة with markers and and that's it. There is no real direction in investing in art and culture and nurturing it at a young age. There is no interest in taking field trips to art shows and art exhibitions. It's only when you go to college, if you go to college abroad, you choose to go to these art excursions in Russia and Florence and whatever, and then it becomes your own individual initiative. But as a country, in the past, that wasn't really the scene. Now there are more things and there's more access to that, but it's still not
fully developed or
fully
pushed.
developed. Yeah.
I may not entirely agree with that. I think the same with sports, for example. When we were kids at the PE classes, they used to give us the ball and go play, do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it was a hobby that people took it to the streets, to the local communities that managed to. But when we were younger, when we were kids, I think the art community was very limited, and that did not do it a favor in terms of spreading the culture and the knowledge and the awareness and appreciation for arts. But again, I think technologies today have managed to help with that. The telephones that we have in our hands that has cameras at the back of it, where people started to getting that as a hobby, or the social media and the presence of art in that has helped it to spread a little bit more and more day after day. But that will take a while. But again, the same challenge we have with sports as well and with certain other emerging sectors is that people see it as a hobby and full stop, at least in our part of the world. So we need to add to that education. So probably the schools, the education system, we need to redefine how we look at arts. And I think we play a role.
Can I ask you here, with Tamkeen, looking at skill development, looking at job creation and so on, is there a plan for a system of grants, residency? How would that fit?
Again, I think it's a good question, but I don't have an answer for it at this very moment, because we're at a point of time where we're trying to hear from the community and shape the strategy. And we'll be able, hopefully within 2-3 months period of time, nothing longer hopefully, we'll be able to come back here in Riwaq and speak to you about how can we help.
Yeah.
And that would be the major question. And I think I'd invite my colleagues in the private sector, the representatives of different entities and institutions, as once we get that sort of clarity on how can we help, there will be a role that will not be covered. No matter how much funds we have, we're here to look at all the sectors in the economy. And I think there will be a role for the other entities to play as well.
Can I just add, with the existence of the National Council right now, I think one of their mandates should be, I don't know what their mandate is now, but one of their mandates should be is to systemize and institutionalize job creation in art. The private sector will only be able to support. They're not subject matter experts at the end of the day. And I think, like there is, مثلا, when we sit and talk about this many women were employed, people of special needs were employed, and then we go all about it in the press and we talk about it positively, and it's something that we all do it. It needs to also be reflected within the art scene. Why shouldn't there be jobs within the art sector? Is it because there is no proper concentration, no strategy? But I think the council will need to get into that and identify jobs and create jobs in that field. The private sector can only support monetarily.
This will take me to my last question, because I think we're running out of time. We always look for authorities or government to support or to put a strategy or to put an initiative. Do you think at any point we'll see the private sector, let's say, if we have 3-4 big national companies coming together and say, we want to do an art fund, and this is the fund to support it? Because I think the issue with the fragmentation goes both ways. And I think there is a responsibility on on the big corporates, on the national brands, on the international brands here, to also join forces to create impact. If we talk about impact, impact will not come if everybody works in silos. And we can't just sit and wait for the National Art Council to do that. We can't sit and wait for the authorities to do that.
But see, it goes back to the question is, as a corporate, as a company, what will motivate me to do that? At the end of the day, I have to find something in it for me as well. Okay? Whether it is something that kind of further improves my image, or something that
Brand focus.
adds value to my brand, or indirectly support my business. At the end of the day, even when you're creating value, okay, for the community, you also want to know what's in it for me. For example, we have clear kind of objectives when it comes to different initiatives we do. When it comes, if I want to do something for art, I'm not going to go and act on my own and decide to do that if I don't find something in it for me. And to find something in it for me, I have to understand it first. And I think through collaboration, starting with smaller steps and building on it, I think creating a strategic partnership is what is important. Okay, so you build something, you grow together, and then you add on it year on year until you create something that is of value. But am I going to act on my own? No, I don't have anything to motivate me at the moment. I'm being very honest about it. Maybe I have other priorities that I'm going to focus on. But I think it's about creating that relationship first, speaking the same language, and start to collaborate and create that partnership.
I think it's a great question. I completely agree with Sheikh Badr. I think the nice thing about the question is you were saying, should we depend on the government or the private sector to create a strategy? And I think it's neither one of those two. I think it's collective efforts, and it should be led by somebody in this room. I mean, this community.
You didn't know I was
They're
tell you I have a
looking at you.
project for you all. Reviving Guful with an artistic vision and sustainability.
And
أقول مؤذن وانا كبير. There's a catch.
Well, do we open the floor?
Sure.
So just what I'm just
بارزين لك
بعرف.
Well, I think we'll start at the back and then we'll move.
Thank you all for the discussion. I just wanted to I'm happy at what I say. So I'll just say thank you very much for the talk. I found what Riwaq has been doing over the years, really balancing out both with the government through on one side and artists on the other side. And I found that the organization has the ability to be flexible in terms of the programs and the creative direction it wants to take. But hearing the discussion, the observation I'm kind of taking away is that on one hand you have artists who need to be focusing on doing creative pursuits and spending their time not raising money or filling out KYC or AML documents and things like that. On the other hand, you have governments who are supported by government budgets. So really the observation I'm having is that the pressure and the onus is really on people in the middle, like Riwaq, to do all of the lifting for the entire art and creative community. My question and comment to the panel is that since you are the custodians of the cash, right, who effectively who basically keeps the wheels turning, if you're saying that the strategies and the programs are not up to standard, isn't it the onus upon you to kind of put that in place rather than all the pressure on Riwaq or people that are in the middle?
Thank you, sir.
And answer that. Our business is to sell data, to sell phone lines, to sell internet and make money. This is our main purpose. Okay. Supporting the community is important, but if we don't make money, we can support the community. So we have our core business is what we focus on, to be honest. Supporting the community is important, but that's only possible if we're really focusing on what we do as a company, our mission. And when it comes to supporting the community, it is the responsibility of the person who wants to achieve in this case today we're talking about artists, is kind of reach out and create that relationship through which they can get the investment and the support that they need. I'm talking about on behalf of myself, and can others look at it differently. It's not my job to create a strategy for you or for the community. It's your job, because this is something you want. I tell you, in my career, for example, we've seen people who've been very kind of resilient and getting what they want, and eventually they come once and they get feedback, they go and they come again, and they come. And some of them are artists as well, and until they get what they want, and this is life, you know, you have to work for it. I don't know about.
صح, yeah. لا, and I completely agree with Sheikh Badr. يعني it's look, at the end of the day, there are so many causes that a company or an organization will focus on. يعني if we're looking at art, it's as opposed to choosing to donate money, let's say to charity wheelchairs, to spend money on cataract operations, to bring back vision. Right? So then where is the where is art in terms of all of that? So it does definitely have to be the initiative of the organization. Now, we're lucky here in Bahrain that we have the Art Council, we have organizations like Riwaq, who their sole responsibility and their sole want is to create that scene for Bahrain. And يعني the perseverance of Riwaq and the persistence of مثلا Bayan in approaching Standard Chartered for the house, to stay in it as long as possible, and creating these symposiums and workshops, it forces companies to look at the organization and that this is actually serious. It's not an ad hoc sort of initiative that's going to die down in 3 weeks. There is a vision, there is a strategy, and the strategy is to provide access to art to a lot of people, and at the same time benefit the community and create this whole culture, right? I'll give you an example. يعني within Standard Chartered, there was 12 years ago an employee who had visual impairment, and a colleague of that person thought, okay, you know what, maybe let's do a fund, a personal sort of fund. We raise money to pay for the cataract operation. That eventually became so big that then Standard Chartered pledged $100 million for an initiative called Seeing is Believing. And that initiative paid for cataract operations all around the world to, it's $30 per operation in India, China, Bangladesh, and all of that, to bring back vision. What I'm saying is the main point is, if there is no individual effort with collective community engagement, then why would the private sector run after someone, please paint, please do this workshop, please put a strategy? You know what I mean?
So, sorry, if I can still follow up to that. So, if your entire sort of ethos is sustainability, then don't you find that, so I'm just speaking clear, I'm from the private sector. Like, I'm not here discussing sort of as an art patron or an artist either. And neither am I addressing the question to you guys specifically, but more as a private sector. I just find like answers like that a little bit convenient, because an artist by definition will not necessarily have that skill set to be able to provide all of the all of the compliance and strategies that you want. It's really the individuals in the middle who are art patrons, like the patrons of the Riwaq. And I find to say that I'm a business too, that what's in it for me, that goes beyond like the entire definition of CSR, because it's not about you. It's about that, okay, I'm selling data, I'm selling investment returns, whatever it may be, but I'm in this because it's bigger than my particular image. So what I'm kind of taking away from this is that maybe regulation is kind of the way to do this. Because otherwise, all of the burden is on one person, which is, let's say, the passion of Riwaq, to kind of do all of this lifting for everybody. Because for private sector, they're just going to say, oh, well, you know what, the entire community is already, the documents I'm getting don't pass AML or compliance, or there's no proper strategy. I'm an artist, I'm spending all my time doing art, so how do I do all this? I just find that like not really convincing answer, is what I'm saying.
That's, I think the count is going to come back with something counter to counter argue the point, but I'll if you're not convinced, you're not convinced. But again, I think, you know, like you said, artists should focus on their art. We as business community, we should focus on our business as well. Okay, and you have to find that middle ground, which we have created with other communities. And I don't think it's impossible to be created with the art community. We've created that with sports, with youth, with education. And for example, a sportsman is not, it's like an artist. They don't have time to create a strategy and all of that. But you find a way to create that relationship. And again, it's about the relationship and having a starting point. And from that starting point, you can build on it. I think at a lot of times, things don't happen because of expectations. The person on the receiving end, whether it's an artist or a community, whatever, they have very high ambition and very high expectation. And the supporting corporate also has very high standards and KPIs and compliance. And if they want to start there, it doesn't work. You have to create the relationship first and start, even if it's something small. It's a starting point. You learn from it. And I find the most fruitful and successful partnerships that started with something small and then it grew. But creating that relationship is very important. Is where you start trusting each other, where you start, sometimes you do something, rationally doesn't make sense, but you have that gut feeling that, okay, you have faith in it, let me try it. And sometimes something good come out of it. And not everything is going to be successful and not everything is going to work out. Sometimes you also, from both parties, you have to know that this might work and this might not work. But at the relationship, creating that trusting relationship, transparent relationship, I think is the most important.
I think this is also the role of grassroots movements. And I think you have Riwaq today as a more mature organization, but there are other grassroots movements that need to start to carry on the weight and to do the heavy lifting eventually between the artists and so on. And I think it's just, again, the sector is developing and evolving. It's still not very well established as much as we would like to say so. But there is a mandate for those grassroots movements that they need to take. Community has also to take lead on what they want to do.
And I tell you, oh sorry, go on.
لا عادي. I was just going to say احنا محاسبين احنا as individuals and as departments and as companies we are accountable for the money that goes out to whatever activity it is that gets spent, whether it's advertising, sponsorship, donation, whatever it is, events. We're accountable for the money towards our shareholders. And towards, it's also يعني أمانة. You know, money spent, I can't just give يعني put aside a budget for a certain project that I know may not give me a return. يعني أنت sorry مثل ما تفضلت مثل ما تفضلت مساء إنه يعني you know, you can't say what's in it for me. It's not for me as a company. It's for my shareholders, because they will come back in the General Assembly, in whatever board meeting, they're going to come and ask who has been responsible for the spend of the money. Why did you spend this money there? So that's why there needs to be clear. We don't come up with these strategies on our own. The board puts together strategies and they want to, we all know, you know, it's not that easy. It just doesn't come out of thin air. And we need to give respect to these shareholders who are actually financing indirectly the company, and without them, we're not really there. And without us being there, there's no community engagement.
And I just want to reflect on something that, please, go ahead.
We have 2 questions in the back.
Thank you all for the panel discussion. My question is for because you mentioned that you are now building kind of focus groups to gain better understanding of how you can benefit artists and institutions. So I'm wondering, there's a couple of questions. I'm wondering, one, how are you finding the people who you are including these focus groups? And then second, which is related to something you said about also Tamkeen not being able to fill all these gaps even after you have your findings. So are you then willing to share them with companies in the private sector? Are you willing to share your findings with the Arts Council? Because I think that's really important, is this openness and generosity, because sure, maybe that is the Art Council's role, but if they're not doing it, someone has to do it. And you're in a position also because you've had experience, capability building in other sectors, that you have a frame of mind that is that could be very beneficial to our sector. So yeah, that's I guess the second question is how is that information then going to be disseminated and shared?
Thank you so much for the question. I think that's a great one. I think 100% correct. What we're trying to do today is we're trying to reach out to the people that we've worked with in the past, the people that we've met during different meetings that are related to the sector, such as Sveyan and the team here and others. And we're trying to hear from them. So those focus groups are basically designed to collect data as much as possible to understand where can we contribute, what are the gaps that are there at the moment. And we're not limited to the artists and the artistic community specifically, but we're looking to the other side as well, the investors, the funders. Where do they fund, or what do they fund specifically? Do they have... No. The purpose is to collect data. So we're trying to understand the patterns of funding for the arts community to see where can we chip in and what are the areas that we need to prioritize. Of course, at the end of the day, we need to prioritize. We don't have unlimited funding, and we're equally liable to the other sectors as well to contribute toward their needs as well. That's the second point. Third point, I think, that study or whatever we're doing is for internal purposes, because that will help us to understand where can we help. We're not trying to, maybe let me correct this from what I said earlier, we're not here to build a strategy for this sector. We're here to build a strategy for Tamkeen to support the sector. Of course, the outcomes of that can be shared and will be shared with our main partners in the ecosystem that are related to that specific sector. And that we've done in the past. Some of the findings were published publicly, some of them were shared directly with the concerned entities, and we'll continue with the same approach.
No, just to say also, because I think it's important that findings being public is essential, because again, I think, especially with the conversations we've had across the past 2 days, it's clear that there are spaces that are unknown in the arts ecosystem here, and it's the goal of symposiums like this to try to shed light on those things. And the study that you're doing is also not something that we do. We're trying to find ways into careers or practices, and a lot of times that's outside of school.
Peace out.
So I just have one question there. خلص from the back.
Thank you so much for the talk. I just wanted to touch upon a couple of points. It was interesting because my dissertation was based on arts as an impact to community development. So it's interesting to see Bahrain's case study and its role in the corporate sector and how that's utilized into community development through arts. One thing that one of the key findings is that we find a lot of these initiatives that happen once or happen for the sake of publicity, and then it's sort of just brushed under the carpet. But what about the measures of success towards what impacts have you done to the community that you're targeting and all of that? Was it for the sake of just, it's in the newspaper, our business is out there. And it's not only supporting or sponsoring other projects to make that happen, but hatta big businesses that do CSR. And then they do it for the sake of just a picture in the newspaper. But how have these communities impacted from this project that has been done by such big companies? Where are these communities now? What sort of needs do they have? Has this support sustained itself over time? And utilizing art throughout this sort of process too. And I think this goes back to the point that was mentioned about the proposals that come forward, and then looking at it from a corporate perspective, and especially towards the stakeholders and the shareholders that are a part of it, it's looked at where is the sustainability in this proposal. Because another point that was mentioned by the crowd in as artists or as that community, what if they don't have the knowledge or the means of understanding how to create a sustainable project or a sustainable initiative? Are there hubs or are there places that hone that sort of idea of let us create sustainable ideas rather than let's create something for the sake of publicity, and that's where it goes into. And also another question is, how can we incorporate art into corporate environments and art that speaks for community impact? But for example, I love the idea that Bahrain Airport has brought forward with bringing artworks into different places around the airport. The artworks specifically talk about specific cultural aspects about Bahrain that we may never shed light on or even know about. And I learned a lot from every artwork that was placed in the Bahrain airport, and me as a Bahraini learning about that. Imagine every foreigner that passes through the airport looking at these artworks and sort of seeing, oh, this is the culture of Bahrain. This speaks about something that I never knew about, and I live here. But how can we incorporate the aspects of actually bringing a community and speaking it out, even in places like corporate environments?
If I may, I want to say two things. One, we believe, first, I'm speaking about Batelco, we believe in supporting Bahraini talent, and that includes art and music and everything else. And we're always reachable, and we don't make it impossible for people to come and share an idea and help them on how to turn that idea into proposal. So there are a lot of people who came and they just had the idea and they didn't have the systematic approach on how to create a proposal and sell that idea. We help them. We sit with them in meetings, we ask the questions, we tell them, did you pay attention to that? Okay, if you do it this year, how are you gonna do it next year? We give the support, especially when it comes to young, talented Bahrainis. We believe in that they deserve all the support that they can get. Another part, like I said earlier, that we make it part of our business to support Bahrainis. And I mentioned, for example, using art as corporate gift. So now whenever we can, when it's applicable, we buy art that's done by Bahraini artists or sculpture or something. So we give a gift that is unique, but we also support the artist. For example, during the F1, the corporate giveaways we give, and Karim was with me, as it was a piece of art that created by a group of Bahrainis for multiple pieces. In our paddock lounge in the F1, we had, it's not purely art, like this music. We had a Bahraini female DJ. So whenever in our corporate life, we try to support Bahrainis. I think the challenge sometimes we face in a corporate and artists, they speak completely different languages. And it's a big challenge. I remember we've dealt with an artist, and I'm not saying anything bad about artists, but we wanted him to paint for us 25 paintings that we're going to give as a corporate. We agreed the timeline. Deadline does not exist. مثلا متى بتخلص when I feel like it. To us it's frustrating. Okay, to him he's waiting for that moment to become creative. And so sometimes challenges, and it goes back to the fact that we also need to be educated about art, and I think the art community also need to have a little bit of knowledge of how corporates work, so they can get what they want.
I completely agree. Are we doing enough for art and artists in Bahrain? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are so many amazing artists in Bahrain. And when I say, I'm not specifying in the Bahrainis, I'm saying Bahrainis and everyone who lives in Bahrain.
Yeah, this is what we mean.
Yeah, sure. But what do we do as corporates? Corporate gifts, we help out with the proposals, we try to showcase their art within our meeting rooms, boardrooms, wherever possible. Sometimes when we have an idea, we do approach entities, مثلا Riwaq or whatever, or we want to do a photo exhibition. So these ideas come as and when they fit within what we want to communicate as well. But there is definitely not enough being done for the art scene. Do we need to do more? Who do we engage? We need to engage a lot of entities. We need to engage, and I keep on saying the council, but the council, places like Riwaq, art spaces, artists, for people to take it seriously and to take it to the next level. We don't have that initiative yet. We're not going, maybe we are after COVID, and don't forget, we're just coming also out of a whole 2 years of complete silence and gap. And people have come out of it wanting to do so many things, everything under the sun. And there's not enough time, not enough budget, not enough people. In the corporate world, our teams can take so much as well. Everyone wants to do everything. So we can take things one step at a time. And that's why I go back to saying, when there's a clear vision and a clear strategy, it helps us help you. Like Jerry Maguire said, help me help you. Yeah?
شكرا لكم. أسئلة كثيرة، لكن كصحفية في مجال الإعلام في نقطة دائما أو في عنصر مفقود هو الإعلام. تكلمنا عن التثقيف من الجهتين، من صوب الفنان ومن صوب المستثمر. اليوم ما نقدر نقول يمكن أداة ممكن تستخدمونها كمستثمرين هي لو كان في حركة نقدية، اليوم ممكن تستثمرون في إرسال أشخاص يتعلمون النقد الفني ويتعلمون شلون ممكن نفلتر ونشحذ الفنان مش بالقسوة، ولكن نمسك تجربته الفنية ونقيمها، هل تستحق الاستثمار أو يستحق أنه يجب عليه أن يطور ذاته وينقل تجربته إلى ليفل جديد أو مرحلة جديدة. فعنصرين مهمين ممكن نلتفت لهم هي النقد وأيضا الإعلام. لا يوجد هناك برامج إعلامية متخصصة تثقف كل طبقات المجتمع. لا يوجد هناك أشخاص، هذه ممكن هذا ديسكشن نفتتحه مع سيدة بيان عن الإعلام، دور الإعلام في الفن. كان في دور الجمعيات الأهلية الموجودة اليوم هي صغيرة وستاين، بس تضم تحتها أيضا فنانين ما عندهم بجت وإلى آخره. فشيئين، النقد. اليوم أنا كإعلامية حابة أطور نفسي من ناحية ثقافية أو فنية، جوار مثل حضور مثل هذا المؤتمر وأيضا مؤتمرات خارج البحرين أو شهادات أو ورش عمل وهي كلها موجودة، ولكن لو كان موجود الإعلام والنقد يسهل عليكم نقدر نستثمر. هناك تبرير، هناك فهم لماذا يجب علينا نستثمر في الثقافة، والثقافة غير ملموسة، مش شرط تكون لوحات ثرية على الجدران، ممكن تكون الأكل والشرب والأزياء وكل أنواعه، وبذلك هاي شيء أتوقع.
فهل كمية تسليط الضوء على القطاع الفني محدودية ذلك أو محدودية تسليط الضوء على القطاع الفني يسبب يكون أحد الأسباب ليش الشركات تبعد عن الفن تروح حق الأشياء، يعني الفيزيبيليتي اللي تحصلها الرياضة وايد أكثر من الفن بحكم شعبية الرياضة.
هو مو بابتعاد، هو نفس ما قلت، هو قلة خلينا نقول المعرفة بالتفاصيل والاهتمام، يعني مو بالاهتمام، لا الاهتمام موجود. لقيتي فكرة مثلا اوكي هو مو الاهتمام موجود، بس مثلا احنا يمكن مفهومنا محدود على اذا نتكلم عن الفن هو ندعم اقامه معرض، يعني هذه لان احنا اللي نشوفها في الجرايد بس افتتاح معارض ما نعرف اللي وراه. انا اليوم فرصه مثلا هنا في شيء اسمه ارت ريزيدنسي، اعتقد نسيت اسمه بس انا نصر اسمها وهي توصف بس the first time I hear about that انا قلت ترى artists they take a lot of time and effort and invest in themselves and in their talent to produce something of value, but we don't know that. زين ولو ارجع بكره الشركه واكلم احد اقول له حبيبي ما بيفهم. زين ف I think getting educated خلال ندوات مثل هذه يمكن getting more corporate people involved. مثلا احنا نسوي ندوه معينه عندنا في الشغل عارف وشابه creating that relationship. كل شيء يبتدي بذي العلاقه. First you have to create that relationship, then you build on it. So we start speaking the same language. هم يعرفون احنا ايش نبي، احنا نعرفهم ايش يبون. But we have to start somewhere. خلال الإعلام.
عندنا سؤال.
So I just wanted to reflect on something that we've been saying since yesterday, and it's about shifting culture and shifting how people, organizations, and everyone perceives the arts, and it's often perceived as a luxury, as a hobby, as something that's extra. And sometimes we hear that even in terms of the priorities for funding organizations. So if we're this session particularly about corporate social responsibility, if I go to 90% of CSR pages, art is not going to be on them. So that automatically makes artists and the art sector feel alienated and not welcome to even come and approach anybody about any opportunity, because they're like, oh, it's not a priority. Us in British Council in particular as well, there were many instances where we've tried to find local institutions that would support some cultural programs because we needed, match funding locally or stuff like that. And there wasn't a lot of cooperation because the priority always goes to education or disability, as you mentioned earlier. And just going back to the luxury point as well, I think we all need to remember, and you touched on this, Noora, earlier, is when things got really dark and when we were all locked in, art was our release, right? And it's not just about painting, right? It's even the art we consume on a daily basis on social media, on TV, on film, and all of that. And we forget how vital that is, how integral it is to our lives in general. It's a big part of our life. It's not just a painting on the wall, right? And it's a space and a platform for discussion. There are many things that people might not discuss in open conversation, but through art, they will. And art creates that space. It creates that platform that allows people to express. And that's why it's important. And if we will look at economical value, we have, I think we're all in one way or the other also working towards Vision 2030. And one of the main pillars of that is diversifying the economy and supporting creative economy, and this is art. So I think companies need to see it also from that perspective. And if we don't look very far, we have like in Saudi, so before their recent sort of cultural opening and all of that, we still have things like Art Jamil, who are huge players in the entire region, not only in Saudi or in the Gulf, and they are a very, like, they're a corporate, right? And but what they chose to have that section in their CSR.
So I'll give you a number. Last year, 21, we received about 100 requests, whether it's sponsorship or donation, 100 in different fields. Art related were only 2 out of 100. Okay, and I'm not talking about accepted or received. Only 2. And both of them were of a very, one was a very big project, sculpture that's for 200 أشياء على مستوى البحرين. Okay, and the other one was again related to a government-supported entity. Nothing from the art community. Okay, and I'm not saying it's wrong or that's wrong. And these are numbers. Okay, from people who are involved in sports, even individuals, we get a lot. Maybe there is the misconception that I cannot reach somebody in the company, they might not welcome me or mashallah, which is not true.
It's also about precedent, isn't it? Because there isn't precedent of big corporations supporting like artistic projects in that way.
But that's nobody, you don't know that, no? You don't know that. It's again, it's an assumption. Out of 100, it's a number. Out of 100, almost none of the requests from, not even a discussion. And again, this year so far, and nothing from artists. The few times we worked with artists, we reached out to them. Okay, because we need them, or we're creating an opportunity to do something. But that says there's a gap in that relationship. And that
about having middle ground and coming, like we both need to come to that middle ground. So maybe as like big corporates, you can do more on encouraging artists or saying you are welcome, you can come. Or
they might have a sign outside artists welcome already. Corporates have changed. It's not corporates the same they were 10 years ago. And you have a lot of young people in management. You have people who actually believe in making a difference. You have people that will engage in discussions with you. It's different. But are you more than welcome to anybody here? More than welcome to come.
Just 2 points. One point about the art. What does it serve? How does it serve us as individuals? It used to be seen as a hobby, right? Like you said. However, right now, we know that there is art therapy. We know individuals with autism use art as a way of releasing that energy. And I personally know quite a few kids with autism, and their art is just fantastic and outstanding because this is just how their minds work. Art therapy, you have people who just want to express themselves through art. So المنظور الحين حق art is completely different than what it used to be in the past. And what we need to do is raise awareness on what art can actually do and how it can serve us as individuals and as a community, rather than just معرض و exhibition وهذه كلها. Now, in terms of نسيت. Yeah, okay, that was it. أنت مرة قلت شيء يمكن ما أسمع.
I think otherwise you have to stop the I have 10 questions myself. I'm just going to keep them for myself for now. And I think we need to establish communication platforms between, I think, the corporates and the art community. Corporates are not evil. I think this is one thing I want to say to all artists. Just approach them with the right product, with the right material. And it takes both of them to actually get things done.
And be patient with us because ما نفهم وايد في الهذا.
Relax. Thank you so much.
First of all, I'm very, very happy to have all of you here today.
We're happy to
Just
be here.
this conversation itself, oh my God, it's really unexpected. I love the openness, I love the kind of tolerance, and everybody's just taking it seriously. It's not, and I thought it would be bored and thank God, there is like, everybody has, even that teacher, the two teachers, they didn't understand you well. We didn't understand you well. We didn't understand you.
to you.
Thank you so much. It was very, very beneficial. It's really going to change the future for us. We all, Riwaq is only a platform, and you know, we struggled as everybody struggles. It's like, this is part of life, but it's beautiful that it is coming with results and fruits. It's like really very fruitful. I love it, and I think seeing everybody here is just something heartwarming. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.